Welcome, dear friends. You're listening to the Moonly podcast. In this space, we welcome spiritual masters and practitioners we've met along our journey. Individuals who follow their callings and share stories and tools that help others connect with their inner light. You can find support, new knowledge, and inspiration through articles and meditations in the Moonly app. This podcast has been translated and dubbed in English. Ulyana Lande is a tarot master and teacher. In this episode, she shares why she left her position as CEO, how she found her way to tarot, and which practices have impacted her consciousness. We discuss what tarot is and how this tool can influence destiny. We also sincerely thank Ulyana for her support in creating the tarot section in the Moonly app. Thanks to her, you can now access daily card pulls and explore vivid card descriptions for your personal practice. Ulyana, hi. We'd love to hear your story and how it all began. What led you to tarot?
I'd be happy to share. I think this might resonate with people who have chosen a helping profession. There are quite a few of us. I have many students who have been working as tarot readers for a long time, and there are always new people walking this path. Everyone has their own story, but, mine is quite classic. Many people follow a similar journey, where at some point in life, esotericism comes into your life as a hobby, something not yet significant, not yet important. By esotericism, I mean an alternative worldview, one that includes concepts like energy, higher forces, and the structure of our world. When I was 17, I was curious about everything. I attended all sorts of workshops and trainings, always eager to learn, and of course, there were key moments, milestones. For example, I participated in a dark retreat, a training conducted in complete darkness. It's believed that this kind of experience is very stressful for the psyche because there is absolutely no incoming information, no visuals, no sounds. For 10 days, you have no idea whether it's morning, day, or night. No sounds, nothing. For me, it was a revelation. I realized just how much I do on my own in my life. And, it's one thing to understand in theory that I create all my emotions, and quite another to experience it firsthand. I would get upset for no reason, start recalling old conflicts, replaying them in my mind and explaining them. And at that moment, something shifted inside me, realizing that I am the one creating everything in my life. It might sound cliché now, but at that time, it felt like a turning point. We all know this in theory, but feeling it in practice was something else. Another significant part of my journey was the Peruvian shamanic practice of ayahuasca. It's a vine that grows in Peru and is considered a national treasure. It's studied at an official institute, and from it, they prepare a special drink that has a powerful effect on consciousness. It works on the level of neural connections, rewiring them in the brain, and what happens is that a person starts to see things in a completely new way. They stop looking at them how they used to, and suddenly, everything appears different. That was my experience as well. It's difficult to explain, but the feeling was clear. After that, I was never going to be the same again. There were things I saw and felt differently, and it's a very rational experience. Different parts of the brain and perception are engaged. It felt like I saw how things work in a different way, and now there's no going back. There were many practices like that. These were probably the most significant ones. And of course, at the same time, there was the usual social life. I worked in an office, gradually advancing in my career. I became the department head, then a production director, and finally a CEO. And at one point, these two paths converged. I suddenly realized that I could continue being a CEO. I understood how it would unfold, where I could grow into a higher position, higher responsibility, and more money. But I didn't want to. And this, I think, is something many people who choose an alternative path will recognize, stepping away from a very clear, obvious way of life. Believe me, most of my friends didn't understand me at that time, but I would go to bed happy, wake up happy, and know that this was the life I wanted to live. Sure, there are difficulties, challenges, and problems, but they're the problems of a happy life, I'd say. there's always something to strive for. There's so much more I still want to do, but when I think about what I would change, I realize I wouldn't change a thing.
I'd like to ask about your decision to step down from such high-level positions. What was the decisive factor? What made you want to leave?
You know, it wasn't an easy decision for me because I had been framing it in a certain way before. Since I was the CEO, no one was above me. I thought I was quite free. But over time, my understanding of freedom started to shift, and I realized I now saw freedom in a completely different light. It wasn't about being able to show up at the office at 12 p.m. instead of 10 a.m., or choosing the people I work with. It became more about what I was putting my soul into and what I ultimately was receiving from it. In esotericism, one of the key concepts is the concept of my true self. It's called, I don't need the best, I need what's mine. And this feeling of mine started to fade away. My job was clear. I was engaged in organizing contracts, negotiations, and all that. But there was no inner response, no resonance with the idea that this was mine. And at that moment when I realized this, it frightened me more than I would have expected. I thought that I was living the life I wanted. I found esotericism interesting and meaningful, and it was a big part of my life. But then, at a certain point, I realized I had come to an either-or choice, and that scared me. I realized I had been living under the illusion that I was completely uninterested in things like money, comfort, status, or a certain lifestyle, but I realized that wasn't true. It was true to an extent, but not entirely. I remember it took me a whole year to truly come to terms with it. That's a long time. But I took my time. In the end, I realized that I wanted to do something that resonated with me and gave me energy. Sure, there are challenges, difficult situations, clients, and times when I'm not particularly happy with myself. Life is not without problems. But the feeling that what I'm doing is mine, that's what truly resonates inside me. Even facing difficulties or obstacles on the path of what's truly mine feels different. And the opposite is true too. You know, how many people reach a very high social level and then feel disappointed? They think, I was born, I lived, and is this all there is? Yes, there's money, but no happiness. And happiness can only be found when you're doing something that's truly yours. For many, that happens. Plenty of people feel happy in social settings, and there are lots of people in an office environment who are genuinely happy. Thank God that's their path, and they're fulfilled in it. But for many others, it's not. I was stepping away from that internal feeling that it wasn't mine. I didn't feel any joy from putting my energy into something that didn't resonate with me. For me, freedom now means doing what I love, not following a socially approved, ritualistic path.
Ulyana, this is really interesting. Did you immediately discover the tarot tool, or was there something before it?
You know, when I first started to formulate this in my mind, I suddenly realized that I would have to leave because, at that point, I had already deeply stopped choosing it. By that time, I had been practicing tarot, but like everything else I had tried, it was one of many things I had explored. At that point, I had two main interests: socionics, which is a branch of psychology, and tarot. And I guess it just happened that way. I'm sure many people who eventually found a particular tool in their life can relate. Tarot simply resonated with me. It came effortlessly to me. It just clicked. Only a year later, I was invited to teach. It just worked out well. When I made the choice, I wasn't thinking, I'm 100% sure this is my forever path. I didn't think like that. I knew for sure that I was leaving something behind, something I no longer wanted. And in that moment, I chose tarot. But I didn't set it as a goal. It just happened naturally, more and more. It took me about a year to realize that I needed to let go of what I had been holding on to. That part was difficult too. I even tell my students in my tarot course how it felt to slowly let go of things that were once precious to me, things that had essentially become attachments, like luxury brands, fancy vacations, an upscale gym membership, a hairstylist, etc. But just to clarify, This is not to say that choosing a path in esotericism or moving away from the social world automatically means financial hardship. It's not about that at all. If anything, I'd say that my financial situation looks different now. It's a bit less than when I was a CEO, but still quite comparable. The point is that when we choose a different path, nearly everyone goes through a stage where we shed our attachments.
It's like reset, right?
Yes, a reset. The point is that money is a wonderful, necessary, essential element, and it's great to have it. For people who have found their path, whether in esotericism or anywhere else, the problem is when we depend on it. Dependency is when something controls us and we can't live without it. That stage, when you lose everything and find yourself without money, is a part of the soul's journey that allows it to move forward. You no longer depend on it. Once you've gone through that, you're not afraid of it anymore. Sooner or later, everyone goes through this. But this isn't exclusive to esotericism. I know people who lost everything to the point where they didn't know what they would eat for dinner. For me, it was a little easier. It all depends on fate and other aspects. But little by little, bit by bit, I moved forward. It was hard, but I never regretted it.
Ulyana, did you study tarot somewhere?
At that time, I attended a tarot school. I went there simply because I was really interested in it. I enjoyed it. The course lasted over a year. For someone like me who's restless, having to study every week for over a year seemed almost impossible. It's just not my style. But, I went to class like clockwork and didn't miss a single session. And later, they invited me to teach there. The system taught at the school was Papooses' system. In tarot, there are 3 classic schools, or even 4, formally, if you count the Marseille Tarot, which some include and some don't. There is the White system, the Crowley system, and Papoose. I didn't intentionally choose Papooses' system. After comparing the schools, I simply chose the one I liked, and their system happened to be Papoose. But there are a lot of original contributions from the founder of the school as well. It's not purely Papoose' system. Papoose was a doctor, a scholar, deeply fascinated by spiritual matters. He didn't actually create the spreads. He laid the groundwork and described everything for us, but he didn't work with predictions directly. So there are a lot of original developments and essays that make the system very accessible and applicable. Because, one challenge with esoteric tools is that they're hard to pass on. I know a lot of talented tarot readers who use other systems and say that you can't teach this. It requires a decade of study, or you just have to be a student and absorb. There's no other way. But I sincerely believe that's not true. Anyone can learn. It's just a matter of willingness and readiness.
Based on your experience, what's the percentage of theoretical knowledge in it, the meanings of the cards? And what's the percentage of, let's call it mysticism, what you channel through yourself and give to the person?
It's tricky. This is the beginning of a territory where our vocabulary and concepts aren't very clear. So let's start by defining terms. Personally, I believe there's no such thing as mysticism, just different levels of knowledge. Just because our culture doesn't fully understand how this works isn't enough to immediately label it as mysticism. So there are very real and tangible mechanisms here that people can grasp when they start practicing. It's just that science can't explain it in concrete terms, though it tries. Tarot, through the meanings we connect with, is used as a tool to see a holistic picture of the world. Imagine if we removed the concepts of flow or the stream of information that we tap into. Picture 2 people describing a piece of work, a report. One person explains it in their own way, giving a general overview. Then another person describes it from their perspective. Even without any esoteric concepts of flow, a lot depends on one's ability to see the bigger picture, analyze it, frame it, and explain it logically. A huge part of this comes from the person himself. It's not necessarily a mystical part. So, while the tarot cards provide certain meanings, that's probably about a third of it, maybe even less. The larger part comes from the tarot reader, but it's not necessarily the mystical part. There's also the element we call from the flow. This is when we pull information that isn't directly represented in the cards, but other tarot readers, at least those who studied with me, will understand what I mean by this. So, a big part of this is how the tarot reader taps into information from the flow. If you were to ask me whether there's a card that comes purely from the flow, I'd say it's probably 50-50. But if we're talking directly about card meanings, it's even less. Now here's something interesting. The tarot system is structured in a way that a person who's just starting out and hasn't yet developed the part of the brain that handles intuition is guided by the system. Most people don't really use their intuition consciously in daily life, so they often struggle to control it. It's there in the background, of course. Everyone's intuition works at least once in their life, but we usually notice it only in hindsight. Here, we're learning to work that muscle, that part of our mind. So, a person who's just starting out and may not be fully there yet will still be guided by the system. If they've been properly trained and stick to the tarot meanings, they'll simply express things in a more concise way. They won't make mistakes, but they might not speak as expansively as someone with more experience who taps into the flow for extra information. That's where the difference lies.
Ulyana, can you tell me, how do you feel this flow? When the deck is in your hands, what internal sensation guides you to draw a particular card? Will it be in the upright position or reversed? I'm really curious about what inner feeling you rely on.
There really is a certain internal sensation, and it's made up of a collection of smaller sensations. Imagine, if you will, the concept of tension in microdoses. It's this specific energetic state, an emotional state, and a slight mental hum, like a very faint ringing in your head. It's all of these things combined. But from experience, I know that this feeling is unique for each person. No matter who you talk to in the tarot world, whether a reader or an expert, they'll all say something like, "I can describe this feeling to you with words, but it won't fully capture it. It's impossible to fully express these sensations with words." Here's an analogy I like to use. Imagine trying to describe the taste and aroma of coffee to someone who's never tasted, seen, or smelled it. No matter how hard we try, we can't do it. And to say that person has fully imagined what coffee is like would be impossible. They've only imagined something distant and abstract. It's the same here. Each person has their own unique experience. So, in my lessons with new tarot readers, I usually tell them, just pay very close attention to your own state. When a student first starts practicing, they often struggle to focus on these subtle nuances. They may feel like they're not sensing anything at all. But if they persist and keep scanning their state, continuing to ask themselves, what do I feel right now? Then, with practice, those tiny sensations and nuances will become much clearer. Even the feeling of flow, the energy, can vary greatly. Information energy is just one of many types of energy we work with. Personally, I've become so accustomed to it that sometimes it feels like I'm not experiencing anything particularly special. It becomes just another part of the sensations, one you sort of get used to, and it's not really noticeable. It's not a strong, powerful sensation. It's something subtle, because it's all about working with energy.
How is tarot different from other tools?
Tarot is a tool that provides information on a certain level about fate, one way or another. That's how I see it now. There are many such tools, and they all differ from each other. It's not about one being better or worse than the other. It's more about what works for each person. For example, astrology also deals with fate, but in a different way. When it comes to timing, assessing periods or deadlines, astrology does that better. Runes, on the other hand, describe things more generally. They classify energetic processes in a very succinct and beautiful way, but they tend to be less detailed. Now, I understand that there may be rune practitioners who may disagree with me about this, but this is just how I perceive it based on my own experience. There are areas where tarot, however, is not universal. For example, tarot is more suited to working with karmic stories. It's a tool for working with karma, and it's believed that the information tarot gives us is meant to help us move more effectively along our life's path. It's about working through our fate in the most efficient way possible. Anything that doesn't quite fit into that framework, tarot isn't particularly suited for. So when it comes to things like physical health, for example, tarot might not be the right tool. I would say that to discuss health, maybe it's better to be a doctor. If I were a doctor, maybe tarot would offer insights in that context, but that's not something I understand because I'm not a doctor. It's not obvious to me. So perhaps the question isn't about tarot as a tool, but rather about karmic matters, life scenarios, and fate. When it comes to luck, whether things work out or not, I think tarot is essential. Of course, someone with highly developed intuition, self-awareness, and enough knowledge to guide them might not need tarot to navigate relationships, for instance. But when it comes to fate, whether something is meant to happen or not, why is someone in your life at a particular moment? What's the karmic reason behind certain events? How can you explore these questions without tarot? So I'd say tarot is simply a tool that provides something for the mind and logic to latch onto. The cards, the symbols, they're all part of that. At the same time, there's an essential component where the flow needs to be activated, because you can work with tarot without it, but the reader will feel unfulfilled. Without the flow, the cards can't offer their full potential. There are people who practice claircognizance or clairvoyance who don't need any tools, but I'm not sure how that can be taught. Maybe I just don't know at the level I'm at, but tarot can definitely be taught. It's a powerful tool for working with fate, and anyone can learn to use it.
You've mentioned fate several times, and I'd like to ask, what exactly is fate? Is it something that is predestined?
There is a part of our lives that is predestined, and we typically refer to that as fate. This is often how tarot courses start. People might say things like, if fate is real and we can't change it, then what's the point of doing this work? And if there is no fate, and we're fully responsible for everything in our lives, then why do we even need this? And as usual, the truth lies somewhere in between. Think of fate as a very wide river, with many different possibilities, but the direction of the river is already set. People who say anything is possible are, I think, somewhat misleading, or maybe I just don't agree with them. For example, it's obvious that it's impossible for me to become the President of the United States. That's highly unlikely, right? The river of fate is wide, but it still has a predetermined course. And that course might mean that at a certain point, a person will experience a lesson in betrayal, because the soul needs that experience. It's already written. But how this lesson unfolds, that's our free will in action. How we navigate the river, whether we swim breaststroke, crawl, wade through the shallows, or travel down the middle of the channel, that's up to us. For instance, let's say our protagonist has chosen a path where they're working in a big city, starting their own business. Perhaps they'll learn the lesson of betrayal through a business partner. If they choose a different path, maybe they'll experience it in a different way. Say, living in Bali with friends, and then one of them betrays them. There's a part of fate that we can't avoid, but how it manifests and how we experience it depends largely on us. And I would say that the ideal way to live our lives is to observe the path of fate as best as we can. We can't see everything because the human mind isn't built that way. We don't have the tools to perceive everything. It's like this. We know that in a four-dimensional space, there's a cube, but visually, no matter how hard we try, we can't immediately picture it as a four-dimensional object. We can only see three faces at once, and to see the fourth, we'd have to rotate it. But seeing all four faces at the same time is impossible because our minds aren't designed for it. It's the same here. We can't see everything all at once, not in its full scope. But with tools like tarot or other instruments, we can see a large part of it and adjust our actions accordingly in a way that aligns with how we want to experience our scenario. For example, we might go through lessons like financial struggles, but at the same time, we could choose to feel good about them and grow from the experience. The circumstances can change, and that's where we have a choice. We just have to work at it and put in the effort. For instance, in relationships, there's a huge opportunity for us to learn about our femininity and explore our roles as women, whether or not we're in a partnership. This is like two different scenarios, one where we're with a man and one where we're not. If you're a woman seeking a relationship, this makes a big difference. Then, if we want to understand fate in relationships, how it's meant to unfold, what we can do, and which direction to take, it's all about learning the lessons of partnership. And for that, we need the right tools.
Ulyana, what interests you more? Doing readings and working with people, or teaching?
I've spent most of my time teaching, but it's hard to say because they are two different things. For example, I can't imagine completely stopping working with people, but I can imagine taking a break from teaching. Yet the idea of never teaching at all, no, I can't picture that. So I'd say I really enjoy both in different ways. When I work one-on-one, I love the shared energy and the transformation that happens. Especially in the area of personal relationships, when I know exactly how it works. I've witnessed so many cases where someone hasn't been in a relationship for 5, 7 years, and then suddenly they meet someone and everything falls into place. Of course, not everyone, but there are so many success stories like that. I get really happy when I get to go through this process with someone. I also love working with people who are ready to put in the effort. When someone is willing to invest and take action, I really enjoy that.
Do you give recommendations?
First of all, the topic of relationships is really underexplored in our culture. People know what they need to do for their career to take off. There's a general understanding of how to build a career, gaining experience, developing certain skills, and knowing what to learn to make it happen. But when it comes to relationships, it's like the fairy tales. Everything ends with a wedding. But how do you get there? That's unclear. In those fairy tales, it's simple. Like in Cinderella, you just sit and wait and eventually it happens. And that's it. There's no more information. So when it comes to relationships, there's a part where I explain how it works. Because a person can't check in with me every day to ask questions. They need to understand what's happening and where they're heading. They need to know how it works. After that, we look at their individual story, the specifics of their life path. Then I give specific recommendations, how much they can take on, and how it will fit into their life. However, I only offer detailed guidance once I feel the person has a clear understanding of what they need to do overall. Until then, I won't get into specifics. But usually, people are ready. The only thing I don't really like is when someone says, "Just tell me if it's already there." That's not my style. I believe everyone has their own path, and I'm not here to dictate how they should live. What's more interesting is when a person understands, adjusts, takes action, and then sees the results. When results appear, the person's energy doubles, and they're motivated to do even more. It's really rewarding to see that. So yes, the recommendations are very clear. There are people who aren't really into esotericism at all. They say, "I'd rather not have that." This usually happens with men, especially when it comes to work. But still, tarot is primarily designed for working with karmic meanings. So yes, there are clear recommendations. Fate is when we align the original plan with our desires and find the most convenient and shortest path to achieve it. That's how it works.
What are the most common requests people come to you with?
Requests usually come in 3 main areas. The first is personal life. The second is self-realization, anything related to work, money, and everything else. And the third is spiritual growth. Of course, people may not always frame it that way. Sometimes a person comes in and can't even articulate their question. But in general, I don't need them to. I'll pull out the request myself. After all, they're not tarot readers. They don't know how it should be phrased. For example, it might come out like this: work is fine. Personal life seems good too. Wife, kids, everything seems okay. But, there's this feeling that something's missing, like it's all not quite right. I feel like I'm going in the wrong direction. That tells me they're going through a certain phase in life. They won't put it that way, simply because they don't deal with concepts like fate, karma, lessons, or what the higher powers want. But I do. So they speak, and I understand what they're asking. They want to know what's going on. After that, I dig deeper. If it's the feeling that something's missing in their life, I'll pinpoint it, because I know how it works. And then I'll tell them what's missing and what they need. By the way, when I do this, almost always the person says, Yes, I just couldn't put it into words. So they already knew, but they just couldn't articulate it because they didn't have the knowledge for it. When it comes to work, people often ask, is this my path or not? Is this fate? Should I start my own business? And what's going on with my finances? Because money is also an energetic matter. Some people have specific blockages in their financial flow, while others are just experiencing temporary issues. Sometimes the questions are very specific. Should I leave this job or not? Should I take this job offer or not? Talents? Abilities? What am I meant to do? It's important to note that tarot has a unique feature. As far as I know, all serious systems dealing with fate share this trait. Tarot can't live for the person. There are things tarot won't reveal until the person reaches them on their own. For example, when it comes to realizing one's potential, I can't just tell someone, go into this field. But if they've already come to that point and ask me, I'm thinking about becoming a doctor, then I can assess the situation and tell them, yes, this will work for you. Here's what might not work, how much time it will take, and where to go. But the person has to arrive at that point themselves. Because tarot is a tool for guidance, not a replacement for the person's decisions. Tarot doesn't take away the responsibility for decision-making. It only provides information. Now, when it comes to relationships, for example, the higher purpose of an encounter, why did fate bring them together? What was the plan? You see, we all have this fear of closeness, and taking emotional risks can be terrifying. Most people already have experiences that make them want to play it safe, so they want to understand, what is this situation about? And I honestly don't know how to figure that out without tarot. Astrology also looks at what fate intended when two people met and what the purpose was. That doesn't mean nothing else is possible with that person, though. That doesn't exist. There will always be a minimum purpose to fulfill in any relationship. The rest is up to us. Sometimes people ask, where are we in our relationship right now? Can it be saved or should we move on? They want to know what will happen next. It's a classic situation where people don't understand whether it's habit or love. You can't imagine how many people don't even know what they feel for each other. I look at the cards to see what my client feels for their partner, and they always confirm it. But, there are situations where there is love, but there are also so many hurt feelings and unresolved issues that the love is buried under all of that. And it's unclear whether anything is left or if it's just habit now. There are also people who are interested in something more spiritual. I'm not interested in the details, I already know all that. There are many spreads, aura readings, the Celtic cross, shadow reflections, and more. There's also the Wheel of Raju spread, which takes 4 to 5 hours to do across the entire deck and can give insights for about 5 years. It's a very powerful spread, and there's always something more to discover, something beyond what we can immediately see. This is less common, but it does happen. I once had a client call me from her own wedding, from the bathroom. She was asking if she should go ahead with the marriage or run away right then and there. I understood she was in full panic mode. I also had a situation where a husband called me after his wife had a session with me, wondering, what did she ask you? What did she ask the cards? He even offered me money, but I was trying to explain, you don't understand. It's not about money. It's just impossible to share that information. He kept insisting, wait, you don't know how much I'm talking about. I tried to explain, it's not about money.
Can a tarot reading radically change a situation?
A tarot reading is, after all, just information. So it really depends on the person how ready they are. If someone is ready, the reading will provide the information they need, giving them everything they need to know. For example, it might reveal that there's potential and they should go all the way. If the person is ready, they will take action, and it will work out. Of course, there are times when the person is ready, and the reading reflects that, but more often than not, it depends on the person themselves. For instance, I once had a girl come to me just to explore her fate in love, and I discovered that she had a fate person, a preordained partner. A fate person is a scenario where there is one specific partner that fate has set for you. But people have free will, so they can change anything they want, even what's initially predestined. And she and this person had broken up. When this kind of scenario happens, it's not very common, fortunately, but when it does, it can be hard to piece the lives of the individuals back together. It can be done, but it's not easy. So when we figured this out, I identified who her fate person was. It turned out to be a young man with whom she had broken up 3 years ago. I told her this was her fate person, and when I checked how much damage they had done to their relationship, I saw that they had fallen into a deep hole. They could get out, but it would take time and effort. She called him at my suggestion, even though they hadn't spoken at all for 3 years. The very next day, she texted me saying they were getting married. This wasn't a fate-changing reading, though. She just wasn't afraid. That's what it takes, you know? Imagine most people wouldn't have the courage to do that after 3 years of silence. She wasn't afraid and just went for it. It's clear that such stories are rare, unfortunately, but they do happen, and some of them are truly beautiful. For example, I had a couple who didn't give me their names, and I didn't ask why. Later, I found out she had a reading with me, and he had a separate one. When they reconciled, they told me the whole story. It was so romantic. They described it so beautifully, how I didn't know anything about their situation. I had said one thing to her and another to him, and then when they reconciled, they compared everything I said. It was really sweet. Then there was a man who wanted to test tarot readers. He went to several different readers with the same question. Of course, each of us has our own approach, but the message remained the same. He really hoped that we would give him radically different answers. He wasn't trying to be bad, he just wanted to catch us out. I think when he came to me, he had a breakthrough. He said, what is going on? Everyone is saying basically the same thing, just from different angles. I still think it's wrong. I'm divorced from my wife, and it's all her fault. You're all wrong. You're just saying the same thing. And it was amusing because, clearly, he had been sitting there, listening all along. I thought, well, at least he heard something. Thank God for that. Sometimes there are really tough cases. You know, there's this level of stress where the person knows tarot can help and give clear answers, but when they come for a reading, their stress is so high that they can't really hear me. They're just not ready. All their energy is spent on processing the stress, so I'll often record the reading so they can listen to it later. I'll tell them up front, right now it's hard for you to absorb this, but when you're ready, listen to it again. I really believe in recording sessions because a person can only concentrate for about 15 to 20 minutes at a time. Rarely more, but valuable information is being shared the whole time. Many people, when they listen to the recording later, tell me, it's like I wasn't even there. I'm hearing this for the first time. They pick up on new details because their mindset has shifted.
When is the best time to do a yearly tarot reading?
It's typically done during the Christmas holidays, from January 7th to 19th. There's no strict rule about the exact time, but it's believed that a year is a long period, and over that time, we make so many decisions using our free will that things can change. So, it's hard to pinpoint events clearly across all areas of life. If you're going to do this reading, it's best to do it during the holiday period, when the flow is clearer. I've actually tested this for myself, because I'm not someone who strictly follows ritualistic traditions. I tend to experiment. Is there really a difference in the flow during the holiday season? And you know, there is a difference. The readings can come out differently during this period, so it's generally recommended to do the yearly reading between January 7th and 19th. That said, I don't suggest it for everyone, because while it sounds intriguing, it's really useful in specific situations. It works well for people who want to keep track of a couple of important moments, like potential risks, and make adjustments. It's also helpful for people who are afraid of something bad happening and want to know if it will, or if they're expecting something good, like the birth of a child. That's something that's usually quite visible in a yearly reading. It's hard to hide such an event, though people still manage it sometimes. For example, when looking at the House of Children, sometimes there's a blank spot. You might wonder, what's this blank spot in the House of Children? The cards sometimes try not to reveal certain things when they shouldn't, so the person doesn't know something just yet. If you're asking whether a tarot reader can do this kind of reading outside of the holidays, of course they can. But personally, I prefer doing it during this period to give it a certain energy. Once a year, I highlight the areas to focus on and look at the knots that could potentially change things. Sometimes you can see forks in the road where the events haven't yet solidified, and two possible outcomes are still on the table. At that point, we know that there's room to try to influence the outcome. There are also people who, for example, live an entire year's worth of events in 6 or 9 months. They're just fast-paced people, and their environment can adjust quickly, so they experience things faster than others. Clients sometimes ask how accurate the reading is, or how likely it is to come true. Generally, the norm is around 80%, because there's a lot that we can change along the way. But, honestly, it's often higher than that.
In your experience, how do offline and online tarot readings differ?
I personally work online. I have a large number of clients from all over the world, and I don't even know in which countries they are. Some people prefer online readings. There's no real difference for the consultation itself. Why? Because we work with information, and that doesn't depend on the format. When I work with tarot, I'm working with an informational flow, so it doesn't matter where it happens. Not at all. But from a human perspective, for some people, it can be easier to connect during an in-person session. I used to think I would never be able to have an online consultation as clear as in-person ones. There's just something more human about the direct contact. Energetically, a person feels closer, and that can influence the reading. But now I realize that was just a phase. I truly don't care anymore where the person is located. The pandemic changed a lot too. Many clients who previously only came for in-person readings had no choice but to try online, and they found it was just as effective. It's mostly a matter of client preference.
Ulyana, thank you so much. It's been really interesting listening to you, and I've gotten answers to all my questions. And then some.
You're welcome. I'm happy. You know, I also realize there's a very common question people ask, and I think, how can this be more or less? I always add something extra to my lessons. Do you know what the question is? People often ask if there are any questions that shouldn't be asked in a tarot reading. Are there any restrictions? Well, technically, no. We have a way of gathering information, and there are no restrictions in that sense. But there are certain questions I, as a tarot reader, won't address. I need to be sure that I'm bringing light with my readings. I might sound a bit dramatic, but let's put it this way. I need to be sure I'm not causing harm at the very least. For example, there are times when people want to know about someone else's life. Imagine a wife whose husband has left her and is now living with another woman. She just can't move on and asks, "Can you see what's going on with them?" I won't do that. That's their fate, and I don't have permission to interfere. That kind of reading won't bring her any light. She might think that knowing this will give her peace of mind, but it won't. I'm certain it won't. I would tell her, I'm not going to look into their lives. Let's focus on you. If you're hoping for something from him, let's see if that's possible. Let's look at your future and see what we can change to make it work out. So there are things I won't look at as a tarot reader. There are always people who try to make you responsible for what you say, but I don't fall for that. I know my responsibility as the reader, and I won't take on something that I don't feel is right. There are other questions that come up like, can you read for children or pregnant women? Of course you can. It's like checking the weather forecast to adjust accordingly. It's really the same thing. A person can choose whether or not to do it. Another question that comes up often is about the degree to which self-suggestion influences the reading. Some people doubt the tarot system, so I invite them to try it out and tell them, there's no point in explaining because I'll still say something that couldn't have come from anywhere else. As for those who think, well, maybe they were just influenced by what they were told and that's why it happened. I don't know how much self-suggestion is required for that to work. Think about it. We all listen to weather forecasts, right? Maybe we even get convinced that it's going to rain, but the rain doesn't come. One suggestion isn't enough for something to happen in your fate. Even if someone convinces themselves of something, it won't work that way. I'm sure of that. It's an illusion to think people can be that easily influenced. Maybe there are some exceptional individuals, but when someone says something's going to happen, The person might suspect it, maybe even accept it, but that's not enough to make it happen. In your life, if you remember moments when someone said something and you thought, maybe that's why this happened, I assure you it wasn't because of what they told you. There are other reasons at play. When a person attracts events, it's still within the framework of fate, still following a specific scenario. But even for that to happen, it's not enough for someone to just suggest it. There are other mechanisms in motion.
Ulyana, thank you so much. It's been so interesting listening to you.